if you've never been to an after party before, we're certainly glad that you came and we welcome you. We do all kinds of fun stuff at the after parties. We started with reaching out to people beyond Tea Party, bringing in unknowing believers, bringing in people who don't realize that they think exactly like we think. Then we encouraged you guys to go out and form better friendships with those people and get to know them on a personal level, because if you know someone on a personal level, it's hard to believe that they're racist or crazy or, you know, some sort of militant loon when you say, well, hey, I've been hanging out with this person and they're nothing like that. So we encourage you guys to do that. We did caucus training. We had a Christmas party. We've had Missouri Precinct Project in. We've done all kinds of stuff. Tonight, we're going to do stuff on the courts, how we are picking our judges, how we do our judge selection in the state, and the Missouri plan, and we're going to find out more about that. I don't know as much about that as I would like to, so this is going to be very informative for me as well. We have some stuff for sale in the back. Everything we sell goes towards supporting the efforts that St. Louis Tea Party does, putting on events like this and more. Make sure, if this is your first time here, that you sign in back there on the email list so that you get further event notices about what's coming. We also have schedules back there, so please pick up schedules, because this will tell you, and this is subject to change sort of, but this will give us an idea. The locations will probably not change, but the subject matter may change as I get confirmed speakers and whatnot. So just keep an eye on this, get on the email list, and then you'll always be up to date with what's going on. Oh, I did want to make an announcement tonight. Bill Hennessy will not be here this evening. His son is in the hospital. He's okay, but he needs to be with his family right now, so he will not be here this evening, so please keep him and his family in your prayers. But he sends everybody a big hello, and hopefully he'll be with us next time. With that, oh, and I did want to make another announcement. We had someone in the audience who had purchased, if you came to our big fundraising event in February, we had Michael Leahy was our guest speaker on Friday night, and he has this great book out. She accidentally purchased 2 copies, so if anybody's interested in purchasing this from her, let her know. $17, and she got free shipping, so that'd be it. So we're going to help her try to get rid of that if anybody wants it. He was a fantastic speaker, and this is a great book, so if you're interested, definitely seek me out, and we'll put you in touch with her. With that, I think I will bring up James Harris with Better Courts for Missouri, and he's going to tell us all about the Missouri plan.
Thanks so much. Now, how much time? Because I don't want to be the person that talks too long and everyone gets upset and starts throwing stuff at me.
30, 40 minutes.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I'm going to be scared by the time you leave. My name is James Harris. I help with a conservative group called Better Courts for Missouri. Our website is newmoplan.com. We're part of kind of a center-right coalition of some groups and business groups that are wanting to improve the way judges are selected in the state of Missouri. And just so everyone's awake, I'll do a quick test. And just raise your hands, just for everyone to see what you know. How many people in here think we elect judges in the state of Missouri? How many think that we have kind of like a federal plan, or something where the governor nominates and state senate like the U.S.? Okay. And how many think we have a commission where you have a member of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, 3 lawyers, 3 lay people, and they give a panel? Okay. So you're a little more informed. In outstate Missouri, most folks say we elect our judges, which they do. And we have, I think, 44 circuits in the state of Missouri, 38 elect judges, and then 6, St. Louis City, St. Louis County, probably the largest over here, use the Missouri plan. And for our appellate courts and the Supreme Court, we use the Missouri plan. Across the country, this effort kind of began, actually started with part of post-progressive era movement in the mid-30s. One was a British socialist, and some attorneys started actually in Ohio, and they said no. Then they went to Indiana in 1939, they said no. Then they came to Missouri, and we said yes. And part of the thought of that post-progressive era was, you need smart people to do the deciding, picking judges, picking whatever. You really don't want the people in charge, because you need experts. And it was kind of, if you think about it, if you go back to the 30s and 40s and some of the thoughts and by the left, that was very prevalent. Moving power away from the people and putting an elite or a trusted or someone they thought was educated. And it's operated in Missouri for about 70 years. Across the country, 22 states elect their judges, Supreme Courts, and for most of my remarks I'll apply to the appellate courts. 6 states use our exact plan, the Missouri plan, and it's Alaska, Iowa, Missouri, I'll forget the others, I'll remember, South Dakota, Indiana, and I think Kansas. Then about 5 or 6 states use something like a federal plan or something like what we have in the U.S. Constitution, where a governor nominates in the state Senate or the state House. I think one state confirm. And then the other, so that's 32, about 15 states use, I'd call it kind of a hybrid. It's kind of like a commission, maybe if it's a vacancy, or it's more of a citizen-led commission. We actually, according to research by a lot of legal experts, Professor Ware from University of Kansas School of Law, have one of the most, I don't know if I'd say regressive, but where the people had the least amount of influence or input of any selection process, our Missouri plan. And because in Missouri you have 3 attorneys that are elected by the Missouri Bar from the 3 appellate districts. You have a member of the Supreme Court, which by tradition has been the chief judge. And then you have 3 citizens that are appointed every couple of years by a governor. Then they meet and they send a governor 3 names. Now it sounds harmless, but the problem is you've kind of already, I don't know if I'd say rigged the process, but you've given an organized special interest group a de facto majority all the time. And why should this matter? State courts impact all of us every day. We might not know it. Many times we think of the United States Supreme Court, things like the Obamacare lawsuit, but the state courts over the last 20 years have actually taken on more and more responsibility. Partly as the federal government has shifted more stuff to the states, partly a growth of litigation. Today, 95% of all civil litigation in the United States is handled in state courts. So you think about our states, we've seen state courts in Kansas and Oklahoma impose nearly $1 billion tax increases. As I said, education wasn't funded. We've seen about 6 or 7 states overturn tort reform and other type of measures. We've seen state Supreme Courts, like in Iowa, redesignate or redefine marriage. And the public had no real recourse. And in Iowa, however, Iowa residents woke up and they threw the justices out. They said, we disagree, this is not our values. And they were organized and they were informed and they went out and made their decision. But one of the things that's the problem with the Missouri plan is most people aren't aware. Most people are taking care of their family, working, and this just seems like an odd process. And occasionally you've probably seen a retention vote when you're voting. And it says, shall we keep Judge X? It doesn't really give you a choice, like, okay, if I say no, do I go down to question B and put 2 or 3 names? And so 1/3 of Missouri voters skip it. They don't know. Or if you're my grandma, she always votes no. She's like, well, I don't know anything about him, so it's fire. and so it's almost like clockwork. About 60 to 65% always retain these people, even if they're the highest rated judge or the lowest rated judge. Even if the left-wing Post-Dispatch says fire them, they still are retained by the same point. And my example of that, to show that this doesn't work, would be back in 2006. There was a circuit judge in St. Louis County. I think she had one of the lowest bar rates, 29%. The Post-Dispatch said she should not be retained, which was actually kind of a surprise. She was retained by nearly the exact same vote as Judge Limbaugh, one of the most respected judges. He's now a federal judge, but this was his last retention vote. Well, it's because no one had information. And you can't make an informed decision if you don't know what's going on. It's not really your fault if someone else designed a goofy process to put lawyers in charge and you're really not aware of what's going on. So different states have been having kind of a conversation about what is the proper role. Like everyone, and raise your hand if you disagree, but everyone wants a fair court, everyone wants impartial judges, and everyone wants to fair that when I go into a courtroom, I'll be treated fair. No one, I have yet to meet someone who says, no, I don't want that. But what we saw a couple years ago, how this whole process began, when Matt Blunt was governor, he said, I want to appoint conservative jurists, people that will honor the Constitution, that will follow the letter of the law. He said, that's my judicial philosophy as governor. And his first panel comes. And so there's all this chatter out there, and the Missouri trial attorneys are saying who's going to be on the panel. Actually, at the time, we couldn't release who applied, who was on a panel, and it's on a blog in Kansas City, day before the panel comes out. And all the plaintiff attorneys are like, oh, this is who's on the panel. And a lot of good conservatives had applied. Mike Gibbons had applied, Brenda Town, a lot of good people applied. Then the panel comes out and everyone's like, wow, oh, well, this person was a member of MATA, the Missouri Association of Trial Attorneys. Then the second person was a member of the Missouri Association of Trial Attorneys, and the third person was a Democrat judge. Oh, well, how did this happen? And so what we found out was that the chief judge at the time had gone to the plaintiff summer conference. Yes, sir.
You
Yes.
might want to tell people what the Missouri Association of Trial
Good point.
Attorneys is all about.
Sorry. In Missouri, there's 28,000 attorneys. To practice in a court, you have to be a member of the bar. Then they both have probably like other groups that you can join association. Some join, I think there's the Missouri Organization of Defense Lawyers. Some join maybe the St. Louis Bar Association. And then there's also the Missouri Association of Trial Attorneys. And there's about 2,500 attorneys, give or take, that are a member of this organization. And it's probably, some people choose to be a member of this group or a different group. And they promote, they believe in, I'd say, a little more liberal policies when it comes to the courts and when civil tort liabilities. They're typically about 90% of their money goes to Democrats. And that's fine. People can give however they want. But what we saw when this panel came out, we're like, well, gosh, how are all these trial attorneys on there? And then we started looking at the commission. And what we found were the 3 attorneys on the commission were not just attorneys. All 3 had or were on the board of governors of the Missouri Association of Trial Attorneys. Now, again, let's go through the math. They represent fewer than 10% of attorneys in the state, yet they have all the attorney members. And so so we're like, this is a little odd. And so a professor from Vanderbilt University, Mr. Fitzpatrick, put out a white paper, and he studied the Missouri Plan states. And what he found is that in Missouri, I want to say it's like, I have the fact, I don't want to get it wrong. Overall, 86% of people that were on panels were either Democrats, Democrat contributors, members of the Missouri Association of Trial Attorneys. Now, mind you, they say this is a nonpartisan process. Now, during Republican years, Ashcroft's administration, that dropped to about 72%. So I guess it got a little better. But, and it's nothing against attorneys. If I could guard the hen house and if I could control who was going on the court before I was going to appear, that might help me out. But the real question from a public policy and for citizens, is that good public policy? Is it good for one legal special interest group to exert that much influence over who will go onto our state high courts? And that's really what this whole dialogue for about 5 years has been about. What is the proper role? The opponents will say it's political. I would submit any process where you have humans involved and you're doing appointments, there's going to be some politics. The question really is, how do you make it more transparent? How do you hold someone accountable, whether it be the people having that ability to choose, whether it's the ability to hold the governor and say, you put these people on there that redefine marriage or that impose this $1 billion tax increase. Right now, a governor says, don't blame me, I don't control the commission. Well, who as citizens do we hold accountable? So hopefully if anyone has questions, just stop me. So going back to 2007 when that panel came out, yes ma'am.
I'm trying to dig into my memory,
Sure.
but at some point didn't the League of Women Voters publish something on the judges?
Yes,
For us?
there's a couple groups that do. Sometimes the women voters, sometimes Donna Hearn has the Frontline. She puts out actually one of the best sources of information. Sometimes the Post-Dispatch or some of your local papers will put information out there.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some.
So would you say that the League of Women Voters is a legitimate group, that what they would put out about the judges would be reliable for us, or would it be biased? I mean, I never thought
Sure.
about it before, and I'm hearing you talk.
If you're just reading, questions about the type of cases, I think if you're taking the time going, well, is that what I believe is the proper decision? I mean, we're all, judges work for us as the people,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I think anyone can take your information. I probably would look at other sources as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, there's a professor from Michigan State University, Melinda Hall, who's wrote a book called In Defense of Elections, Judicial Elections. And basically what she has said, voters, when you're electing, they'll use the same process from voting for school board, governor, or judge. And the problem with our retention process, there's a lack of information flow to the people. And so often they're not aware, where from her research she found where elected judges were more apt to be in the community, maybe at a fish fry, maybe at a chamber or Rotary meeting, people more aware, there's more information, and then they make the decision. They also found in some states that elected judges sometimes are more restrained, sometimes they're not. So really the question is what is the proper balance and do people want? The opponents typically will say, the courts are different, we're a separate branch. And I don't think anyone disputes that, we have 3 branches of government. But the question is, how do you hold that branch accountable? And the legislature, the executive can hold accountable. Yes, sir.
Could the problem with the retention elections be that a third of the people are leaving it blank, and you're actually counting that blank vote as a vote to retain the judge rather than to remove the judge?
Well,
We would never do that for a vote for governor. If a third of the people didn't vote for governor, that wouldn't be a vote to retain the governor.
correct.
It would be a vote that's neutral. Whereas for the judges, you must get a majority no in order to remove the judge. The third that aren't voting may not realize this. They're voting to retain that judge when they don't vote.
That's true. But you sometimes, I would submit, you really can't blame people if they don't have the information. And that's really one of the biggest problems. There's no information flow. I mean, I think if you would submit that if you told people 19 of the last 21 nominees for the Missouri Supreme Court on panels presented to a governor were either Democrat donors or members of the Missouri Association of Trial Attorneys, and then said, but this is a nonpartisan process, most people pause and go, that sure doesn't sound nonpartisan. Now, I mean, but I'll keep saying it if I can have the outcome I want. And so really, that has been the whole crux. And you know, going back to 2007, when this first panel came out, it really kind of jump-started the conversation. We put some billboards up in Sikeston, Missouri. It's one of the commissioners and attorneys from there. And we said, stop judicial activism, call Commissioner Birch, and we'll put his phone number. He started yelling at people. Who are you? Why are you calling me? I don't work for you. You know, I was elected by the bar. You serve the people. What's wrong with having people call you? And then he was very upset. We put a billboard up in Jefferson City for our Chief Justice with her direct phone line. And told people, call Judge Stith, say the same thing. Tell her what you think. And they thought, no, that was inappropriate. We're the court. And it's, so what we've seen over time, I guess it would be, they've become a little arrogant. It's kind of like, you know, they've had their own little fiefdom. And they're not, it's just whenever power's left unchecked, when no one's holding you accountable, over time you probably start, you know, like leaving the office a few minutes early, maybe coming in if no one's there on a Monday, a little late at work. I mean, just things happen. And so really the discussion has always been, how do we make it more transparent, more accountable? We've had an initiative petition. We've had different legislation. What we have found, the opponents always say the same thing. It's bad. You're politicizing it. The current process is great. You just want to strong arm and handpick judges. And then they'll try to say some boogeyman story. There's always a boogeyman story, you know, like a John Grisham novel. They always pull out a John Grisham novel. You know, you're going to have these handpicked judges. I would submit, though, however, we already have that. If I walk into a Missouri court and the plaintiff attorney who's representing the plaintiff helped appoint that judge, I'm probably at a disadvantage. When I worked in the governor's office, whenever there was an opening for a judicial bench, all these letters started faxing in. Lawyers I'd never heard of. And as a young person, it kind of annoys. It's like, okay, I got to type the names in, send letters back, and just, well, that's politics. People would start calling the governor, hey governor, you know, would you appoint Sam or George or Sally? It's politics. You might call it something else. You might say, but it's intellectually dishonest to say it's not political. So the question has always been, how do we make it better? This year's measure, and I'll give a couple more reasons why. The opposition has a little funding from George Soros, so that should always tell you you're not sure. His justice at stake, and they're actually promoting this in other states. They're trying to take the states that elect judges and move them to this. And what George Soros' research has found, there's a great guy from Michigan called Dan Perot, runs an organization, and they put out a great research paper, and the left has researched that this is the easiest way to get progressives on the court. And so he has invested, I want to say, I don't know if it's 25 or $40 million over the last couple of years in promoting this. Now, the interesting thing has been they're not making progress. Nevada, for 2 times, they've tried to say, let's get rid of electing, take your power away, give it to smart people, they'll make a good decision. People in Nevada both times said absolutely not. Tennessee's scrapping their Missouri plan. So other states are having this conversation. What is the proper role? On the other side, it's kind of George Soros crowd. They'll typically say it's nonpartisan. They'll say, we have accountable judges. And I don't know if anyone watches Bill O'Reilly, but about a year and a half ago, there was a judge in Kansas City, and he let off these person who was molesting these girls in this marching band. And so he sends the young guy, which hopefully I won't offend anyone, I call them Dr. Magoo glasses, the black, and he meets the judge at McDonald's, and he sticks to the judge, why'd you let these, people off? Who are you? How dare you talk to me? I'm getting lunch. He's still a public servant. He still gets his paycheck from you. And that's one of the problems, where you had the judge over here, Judge Priebus, who went to China, left the clerk in charge. That's just some examples. And it's never been about cases. It's been about the lack of accountability leads to people doing stupid things like that, where they forget who they work for. They forget that being a judge is an honorable, noble calling, and then they go off and do those things. Or our appellate court last year drew an unconstitutional state senate map. They were in charge of redistricting of our state senate. Now, think about this for a second. 6 appellate judges, supposed to be some of the smartest judges or people in the state. I, as a layperson, worked on redistricting 10 years ago. Constitution, Article 3, Section 5, it's very clear. Don't break rural counties. It doesn't quite say that. I'm giving you the cliff notes. I figured this out right out of college. Okay, you can't break when I draw different maps. These 6 judges draw, and they break rural counties. Goes to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court says, yes, you passed an unconstitutional map. Now let's take it a step further. These 6 judges who come through the merit process, they're nonpartisan, right? Failed to read the Constitution. A Constitution for which they take an oath to support and defend. It's not like me making a mistake. I haven't raised my hand, and that's not my job to dispense justice. So if they cannot read something that's very simple, what does that say about the other things that could be going on that we're not aware of?
But what you're saying now, this goes all the way to the top.
The state, I'd say in our state courts,
It goes all the way to Obama. I mean, they swear that they're gonna, do all that with the Constitution, but they don't.
That's right. And so that's really about is how do we make it better. So this year, I'm sorry.
Let's cut to the chase.
Yeah. Jim Lemke.
What does it take
Sure.
to change the Missouri plan to an elected situation?
Okay, perfect. So there's different ways you can do it. We proposed judicial elections. The left said it was awful. They defeated. Representative Chuck Gatzenberger has a measure in the House to put on the ballot a constitutional amendment to allow Missouri voters to decide, do you want to have judicial elections? Representative Stanley Cox in the House has passed a measure, but it's out of the committee, to move to something like the U.S. Constitution. And his basic argument was, I think James Madison and Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, some of those guys are probably a little smarter than whoever came up with the Missouri Plan, and so let's stick to what they're doing in the U.S. Constitution. They've got it right. Let's move to that. Then in the Senate, probably the strongest leader has been Senator Jim Lemke from here in St. Louis County, south of St. Louis County. He's been a leader before it was cool, to ask the question, what is the proper role, what is the check? He has a measure, it's called SJR 51. It's passed the Senate Judiciary Committee. It's probably going to be debated Monday, or begin debate in the Missouri Senate. All these measures would bypass the governor, because they're resolutions to go to the ballot and allow Missouri voters to decide. Whatever's passed would then be ultimately for the people to decide what we'll do. Yes?
Again, is the Missouri Plan part of the Constitution
It is.
of Missouri?
It is. It was adopted in 1944.
1940.
1940.
So you have to have a constitutional
Yes.
amendment to change that.
Absolutely. And there's 2 ways have something placed on the ballot. You can do initiative petition, which the deadline is the first week of May, so that's not possible. And the second way is for the legislature to place something on the ballot. And that's what we're attempting to do.
What's the chances?
I think it's very good. Now, we've had to compromise, and Senator Lumpke's was in a very difficult committee. The Judiciary Committee is kind of a little more difficult. And we had over here Senator Schmidt from St. Louis County sits on the committee. Senator Kevaney from St. Louis City. They voted the measure out Wednesday evening. And so it's set to go to debate. The opposition is the defense attorneys, the Missouri Bar, the plaintiff attorneys, George Soros' group is called Justice at Stake, and for some reason the School Board Association. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that one out. It's kind of like I'm Catholic, and sometimes like when we start rating, when the Catholic Conference talks about illegal immigration, I sometimes get confused. But that's the opposition. They'll say the current process is great. Don't, it's kind of like ignore the man behind the me. From what was that? Liz Ross, thank you. And they'll say it's merit, it's great, and it's used in all these other states, and just trust us. Basically what they'll say. So Jim Lemke's had to kind of compromise to try to get it out of committee, and we've got a committee of 4 lawyers to go through first. It's a little difficult, but it would have a new commission, his version. The chief judge would be kicked off. It would be a citizen majority commission, so it'd be 4. Larger panels presented to the governor. It's one of the other little problems in the Missouri plan. At times, if commissioners are creative, they'll put less desirable nominees occasionally on a panel, and then the one they want to pick. So it's kind of like you pick the really bad one or the bad one. Yes, ma'am.
But who appoints the citizen committee?
The governor would. And so
That
that's
doesn't make sense. That's not a citizen committee, it's an appointed citizen committee.
Yep. But you wouldn't have it, an attorney dominated. Like right now they have 4.
But now you have a Democratic governor.
You do, but we could at least, I think the thought is, and I'd love everyone's thoughts, the thought with that at least was, hey, then we could at least hold the governor accountable and say, if you want to put these liberals on there, if you want to do that, fine, we'll hold you accountable. But there's different ways to do it.
Meaning what? You're gonna take away?
Make it a campaign issue, maybe have voters talk about it. The different ways, I would submit elections is the best way. I trust people any day of the week. They'll make smart decisions. People like my grandma, she knows what to do. But some will say it's bad. They'll say, look at Illinois. They have these campaigns and they're nasty and blah, blah, blah. Yes?
So I'm curious.
Yes.
26 of 38, I believe, or 34 senators are Republicans.
26 to 34, yes, sir.
And I believe it's 103 of 163 in the House are
Largest
Republicans.
majority in state history in either chamber.
It was 105 or 6 at one time. How is it that the Republicans can't get anything done?
You can give me a trophy answer to that question.
I'm going to ask you to answer that question. You seem to be connected with Jefferson City, so I'd like to know why anybody should bother to vote for Republicans if you get the same result as when you vote for Democrats.
I think, this is just my personal opinion, I think there's probably, you had all these, you've got so many Republicans, you've got different groups, and by it, like I'm happy to be here because I feel like the normal person in the room, as opposed to normal where I'm just ranting in my office to myself. But we don't really have a Republican governor, and people forget.
Not that long ago, there was
That's
one.
true.
And they still had a majority in the Senate and in the House, and still your plan, which could have been enacted then,
Yep.
wasn't. We could go to the United States Senate, House, when there was George Bush was president, and nothing got accomplished there. So that's why I asked these crazy questions about why is it that nobody can get anything accomplished when
I'll give
a lot of people in this room wanted it.
Well, I think citizens need to be more engaged and aware of what's going on, and calling lawmakers and saying, why aren't you voting for this? Why did you vote that way? And just say, hey, I want to know, you work for me. And I might decide to fire you and get someone else. Partly, when you don't have a governor of the same party, what I've just my quick observation has been, there's not really one leading going, hey, let's move the ball forward, let's try to get these things passed. When Governor Blunt was in office, they were moving the first session tort reform, workers' compensation reform, cutting the budget, balancing the budget. They had a plan. They're saying, we're going to get these things done. Governor Nixon has had one legislative meeting, or one meeting with legislative leadership this session. And apparently they really didn't, I wasn't in the room, but it wasn't really a, hey, these are the things we need to get done this year. So I think you don't have you have to have leadership, and I think you have to have citizens more accountable. And I would encourage you just talk to your lawmakers and tell them, hey, do this, do that.
You have to remember also, Missouri politics isn't Democrat, Republican, it's urban rural.
Yeah.
And so, just because somebody from the rural area is Republican, they're not gonna vote with the urban Republicans. They're gonna vote what's best for their particular little county, which is why the money's distributed in the state's way it is. It could be that if they don't wanna pay for St. Louis to elect their judges, because the state would have to pay for that. I don't know why, but you always have to be Missouri in terms of rural and urban, not in terms of Democrat, Republican.
And you always have with politicians, you always have some that everyone's gonna know I said this, I'm always perplexed by people that don't like to make decisions, run for jobs where they have to make decisions, and then they get mad when you ask them to make a decision. And that sounds like a silly thing, and I just made the dumbest comment, but there's always, in any legislative body, you have some that work very hard at not working, or very hard at avoiding a vote. But then they'll tell you, I was with you the entire
Like
time.
voting president.
That's
Right.
our president.
Or, oh, I'll skip the vote. It's like, which I never get elected except they say I'm too crazy, but I'd be loving to yell and yes and no and have fun and state my opinion every day. Yes, sir.
There is a downside to elections that I've been firsthand experience. In the 5th District in Illinois, which is right across the river, each candidate in the last election for Supreme Court spent over $1 million. And we had to go out and raise the money for the candidate we were supporting to stay even.
Yep.
And we're currently involved in a appellate race, also in the 5th District. And we expect to spend $500,000–600,000 for an appellate judge. So there is a downside to elections. I mean, it's very, very expensive.
They are, to get out and educate people. And part of the problem is we have to get more groups like this to be aware, so that, no offense, people have that information flow. Sometimes people, all the problems that people might have on, let's say, elections, like I don't like soliciting money or what, judicial canons can address all those problems. And most of your good judges will never say whatever. They're kind of boring campaigns. They'll say, this is where I went to school, here's my family, here's my expertise, credentials, and let people, or they'll get out and talk to people. But you're right, campaigns do cost money. But the question is, and really for the voters, the question is, it's almost like a scale. The elections, you might say there's some good and bad, but the people have the complete authority. You have a federal process like the U.S. Constitution where you might go, it's good, bad. If you have a governor you don't like, you're probably not going to like it. If you have a governor you like, hey, good. But there's some accountability. You can go, hey, governor, you made these appointments. And then you have a commission where, I would say it's kind of the worst of everything, and people aren't aware, so they just tune out, move on. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Let me follow up on what they ought to do, and I don't know if it'll ever happen, but they ought to say that if you contribute to a candidate as a lawyer, you can't appear before that judge.
Absolutely.
That'll
That's
never
all,
happen.
That's the thing
but,
with judicial ethics. I used to work for a judge. I'm not an attorney, but I work for a judge who's a member of Congress now. He always harped on me. He said, James, it's the appearance of impropriety. And they call him the judge in Congress. He loves it. I found he loved being a judge. And he said, James, whenever I'd have cases, if it was a friend, if I didn't recuse, I wouldn't talk to him. I wouldn't have lunch with him. You always try to go, what would someone think if they saw you talking to someone, even if you weren't talking about it? And he really took his job seriously. And he thought, it's a very important job, and I think everyone agrees it's important. All those problems can be addressed there. Like at the state senate, the bar, when Stanley Cox proposed the U.S. constitutional claim, oh, look at the gridlock. In Missouri, we require Senate confirmation of the state tattoo board. the Unmarked Burial Humane Commission. We require Senate confirmation. They're like, oh goodness, you can't do that. 99% of the nominees don't get asked a question, sail through. Now occasionally if there's someone, let's say is a Democrat appointed as a Republican, or if a senator has some questions or concerns, occasionally someone will get blocked. But what states have done there, they just put a time clock and said that the nominee has to be confirmed within 90 days or something like that. And so you avoid that that potential pitfall and have another down vote. Yes, sir.
Let me get two questions. The question under, if it's a ballot initiative, it
Yep.
doesn't go to the governor, right?
Correct.
Okay, so what this appears to me to be on Lemke's part is an election year game. Because what you're gonna end up with is you're gonna have a judge who's appointed by a citizen, who's a political appointee of a governor. If you're gonna go through all that trouble to put a ballot initiative together, that's like 3 steps removed from the people. Why not just have it, let the people elect it?
Well, actually, Senator, I'll say 2 things. Senator Lemke's been a solid leader on this for 6 years. He has also proposed and filed judicial elections. It's filed there. They wouldn't move it. And so
Okay, but-
part of it is, I think it's
I
sometimes.
just don't see how we're any better off, okay? Because,
Sure.
let me ask you this. Of those citizens that would get appointed, how many of those can be lawyers? There probably won't be any limit there, so.
Well, right now.
So whatever
well,
governor
sure.
you got is probably gonna pick lawyers anyway.
That's a good point. And I have to look at the final committee stuff. Currently, the lay people cannot be lawyers. So you're right, you want to keep that, so you have a citizen majority. Sometimes the sausage making process is never good. I would prefer something better, and if lots of people started calling, emailing, and badgering their state senators, if you want to make something better, the people will actually push in your lawmakers. Because I can tell you, every lawyer.
Why did it die? How come the direct election died?
Because my honest opinion, a bunch of lawyers in alligator, fancy shoes started calling lawmakers saying, oh, you can't do that. That's awful. It's
So
awful.
did the Republicans end up killing it?
They just didn't move it. So I don't know if you say kill it, it's just.
Well, they got the ability to move it, right?
Yeah.
Can I say something about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've worked with Lemke up there. First of all, Lemke has been an absolute leader on it. At one point, he was calling for the
Impeachment.
constitutional method, but with a 60-day up or down vote, which I think is probably, that's the one that I prefer the most. But Lemke's had to, because of exactly what Lee was talking about before, we have a Republican majority that can't get anything done. He's had to make compromises to chip away at the regime. Another example of that's the red light camera. It should be an easy thing to get away, to get past in the state. They have been able to. He's got a yellow light camera that's going through, which extends the length of the yellow light cameras, and it reduces the profits for the corporations that are putting those on. So in that sense, it may not be the greatest thing that Lemke's pushing, but what he's doing is he's slowly chipping away at what he can get.
Here's what I would suggest.
I think that's
If what you're saying is true, here's what I would suggest. Rather than pushing a bad bill through that doesn't really make sense,
It's
why
better,
not, let's.
it's better than the current.
I know, I understand that, okay? But let's elect Republicans in this next primary that will go in there and help Lemke do the right thing.
Absolutely, and
Instead of putting all
this is
this
my
energy
second
behind a
point.
bill that's.
My second point here is there are a lot of Republicans in the Senate that are the issue. We've got Gary Wiegert that goes up there. Michelle and I try and get up there whenever we can. It does take all of us to get up to the legislature in Jeff City when these bills come up to go testify in these hearings to let them know that we are watching them and we do expect them to do their work. And on the House side, the Speaker has a lot of control on what goes through, and that's where a lot of stuff gets killed in committee and everything like that. Tim Jones is the presumptive Speaker of the House out of Eureka. He is a pressure point that you're going to have to go to, and it's not, you can't just be satisfied with elections and primaries. You have to get to Jeff City. You have to go talk to those guys. You got to hound them and get into their office, and you don't want to be screaming and yelling at them, but you want to make sure they know that you're watching them and that you're bringing people up there with you. I would submit that that's the best way to get stuff moving forward and to help guys like Lemke push better bills than the one that he's had to compromise on.
Well, St. Louis Tea Party is an organization. We just saw an example of that last week when we went up there to talk about the yellow light camera bill. So the Speaker of the House is holding it up. We go to visit the Speaker of the House and say, why are you holding it up? And now it's out of committee. So he's no longer holding it out.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
individual citizens can do the same thing. I mean, we get up there as much as we can, like Ben said, but we can't, you know, I own my own business, Ben has to work. I mean, we have other things
But
to
the
do too.
big factor that, when you, sir, you said, what was the difference back when we had Republican governors and yada yada? The big factor, the big difference is that all of us woke up in February of 2009, correct?
Mhm.
And back when Blunt was governor, we were still asleep then. But what we need you to do, in the 1940, well, most of us weren't even born. But what we need you to do is you just need to tell us, we need to get a better communication system between Tea Party people. We say this at all the meetings. But you need to tell us how we can help.
I would say, no, that's a good point. This aside and stop me, but the way to effectively advocate for conservative legislation, common sense things, is to contact, to have people in the Capitol, because if you're not, other people are. People are paid lots of money, and then there's, I sometimes I'm shocked at how many liberal groups and crazy liberal ideas that are out there. Or they'll be like, gosh, sometimes politicians you got to hold accountable. In 2009, when we voted this out of the House, we were dropping, phone calls, emails, doing town hall meetings, and to get some of these Republicans just to vote yes. And then there was a gentleman he'd voted no the year before and voted yes, and I remember I've saved the article, lawmaker, and they said, why did you go from no to yes? Well, I had 75 people call me. And that's why he voted yes. He said, man, I really don't have people call me too often. And so you all being informed and contacting, having Gary, having people in that Capitol helps, because if nothing else, it's getting information back. I talked to a friend of mine, Greg Keller's with the ACLU, American Conservative Union, and he said they're going to start doing state rankings of certain states. I said, hey, I'd love to send you info to consider, ranking Missouri lawmakers. It's great, because that way you'll have information, and we can promote and get that stuff out, so you can kind of figure out who the rhinos are. Like, why are you here if you don't want to vote? Like we had, part of the reason we were probably delayed, there was a senator that didn't want to vote on this, and just kept coming up with a different excuse every day. And then yesterday, he ranted for 5 minutes in prepared speech, how it was bad, awful, not addressing the real problem, blah, 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 and blah, 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 and then he voted yes. The only reason he voted yes was because he had hundreds of people calling him and say, please vote yes, this is important, the current process.
That's
Yes.
the difference.
And that's the difference what's happened since 2008, 2009. People are kind of awake. People feel that our country, our freedoms are being taken away, that we're going down a dangerous road. And so we have to say, hey, enough. And that has to continue at the state level as well as the federal level.
So is there a list of Republicans who oppose the direct elections? Do we have that list somewhere?
Do you guys have a website?
We have a website, newmoplank.com. I haven't put that list up. We haven't had a vote on it yet. Yes, Joe.
I know, that our natural reaction is to say, hey, let's put the power into the people by direct elections. But we have to remember the last election, most people don't know, do you know who the largest professional contributor to Barack Obama's campaign was? Lawyers and law firms. When it comes to the judiciary, you put it out into regular elections, there's going to be so much money funded into the lawyers and law firms that they're going to silence. They're the ones that get out. Their whole plan on this whole thing came from a guy that was out of Chicago, a guy by the name of Albert Kales. And he wrote the book on how to influence people, how to get rid of the political bosses, put individual small people in there that tell people how to vote. That's how this whole thing came about and got started in there. And so it was how to replace the political bosses. But they replaced the political bosses just with people that were able to hide out of sight now by telling people behind the scenes how to vote. You buy the newspaper, you put it out there like that. You no longer have to be the political boss. So if we go just to direct elections, even in nonpartisan elections, they're going to get out there and they're going to put up. They'll even take a guy. And I know lawyers myself. They run as Democrat and they run as Republican for the same judgeship, because and some of these are good people. They're not bad people, but they know that in some places, in order to get elected, you've got to be a Democrat or Republican.
Let's see the.
We don't want partisanship in the.
You know what,
Yeah.
if they do that,
Well-
I say God bless them.
Well,
They're
I-
working harder than we are, and we
Yeah, I-
gotta work a little bit harder.
Yeah, I mean,
Wait a minute.
Hey.
Trying to say something.
Calm down.
No, I'm just gonna say, wait a minute, here's the problem that I'm hearing. You want perfection. No such thing. To anybody to criticize someone like Lemke, because he's not doing it the way you want him to do it, then you get in his seat and you try to do it. I'd rather see Lemke do progress and chip away at something to get it done, and not do anything at all. And one of the things you gotta remember when you go to Jeff City is, no, just don't go tell the speaker no, and criticize and beat him up. You bring the darn solutions yourself, because that's the only way you're gonna be heard. And so, we are not gonna have perfection, but it's a start. When we talk to state reps and senators about doing away with the contribution to teachers, okay? My watchdog organization is Rockland, okay? We cannot go right to the top right away and go, are you kidding? Everybody would descend like Wisconsin. But they're gonna do them first. They're gonna do the lawmaker and the judges and the employees first, and then say, see, now you gotta do it. So that's progress. It's not perfection, but it's progress.
yeah, if I could say,
Progress is a root word of progressive.
No,
Well-
that's sure.
Okay, well, let's
well,
finish up with
yeah.
Better Courts for Missouri so we can let
I
James
have
finish.
a question about what you were speaking about.
Yes, ma'am.
Which, earlier, you had said that 3 of the people that were on the commission were from the Missouri Association of
Sure.
Trial Lawyers.
Yep.
Did someone consider putting in the bill or whatever that you could only limit to, from one organization, you can only have one, irrespective of
Sure.
the Bar Association, you can only have one representative?
It's funny you say
Voted.
that, because Tennessee's taken about 4 or 5 years to change. And what they did the first year, they said, we're getting rid of it. And they're like, well, we're not quite sure what we're going to do. So they came up with a new commission, and they someone from like the defense attorneys and plaintiff bar, then some citizens appointed by the governor, and I think there were someone appointed by the legislature. And then they've had that for a couple of years, and now they've kind of gone, that's not working. So now they're getting rid of that and moving to the U.S. constitutional plan. So I would say, in closing, a couple things. One, Jim Lemke's been a leader on this. I mean, he wants to push for the best thing he can get, and these people come after him in his campaign at time after time. I mean, if he was being a politician, he would say, I can't do it this year, I've got to run for re-election. But he keeps going after him. I mean, he is ferocious after him. He wants, I think, the best thing. The problem with the current process is still, Jim's right, the attorneys are vested because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. I sue you, you get a lawyer, the lawyers are all making money, we're getting fleeced. So the defense lawyers in some ways are in cahoots, because guess what? Not necessarily on the selection, because those judges at times might help. The real question is, what is the proper role? Who should the authority rest with? And everyone probably has a disagreement. But is the current process working? And how do you make it better? And I think in Missouri, anything like right now when a governor comes in of that commission, they have no voice till the beginning of their 3rd year in office. Then they get their first appointment. So then at the end of their, like about a month before they leave office of the first term, they get to make a second appointment. So they have no voice, if I'm a conservative or liberal or whatever, I can't have anyone on there that hopefully shapes my or his or her philosophy. Now some might say that's what they want. It's just, what do voters want? The new measure, Jim Lemke would move to at least a non-bar, that group. There would be citizens starting day 1. There'd be larger panels going to the governor. Is it ideal? No. But it's one of those things, does it move the ball and start reducing the influence of a special group, or at least make it more transparent for the voters to know? Great. And the beauty about all this, it's merely going to the ballot. You'll all decide. You might say, no, we like the current process. You might say, let's adopt it. And so then the interesting thing in this entire conversation is merely, they're not changing the Constitution. They're just putting it on the ballot and letting voters decide what is that proper role. And all the things that are being discussed, other states that use a commission kind of have. But I think they could do more, but the only way they're going to do more is if really people like you all are talking, are aware, and understand that everyone wants a fair and impartial court. And the way we're gonna have it is that the citizens are a little more aware and kind of asking questions and plugging on what's happening. And I have two hands, I know I need to shut up. Jim?
Back about 6 years ago, when I first started looking into this, the biggest thing I figured out after looking at it was it's not so important to get the perfect change. The important thing is to get some change, because right now, they've got a whole plan on exactly how they work this. As soon as you put one change in, and it's why they're so afraid of any change, even a small change. You put that way, you're throwing a wrench into the whole thing. They can't work it, and they're afraid they get caught when that change goes in there. So it's important to say, even though this isn't exactly what we want, put the change in there. And unless you're completely opposed to what the change is. Say, you know what, this isn't perfect, but throw it in there, mix it up, stop them from being able to operate the way they've been operating. Because, and there wasn't enough time for James to even go into all the details of this, but from the time they put this plan in, it only took them 2 years later, and the court used their power to get more control over the attorney section of it on the commission. They planned this thing out for so long. What we really need to do, let something like what Senator Lemke's putting through, and this guy, Senator Lemke's been looking into this and dealing with this for at least 6 years, and he's as good a guy as here. I went over and helped him put out signs, and I don't even live in his district. He's a good guy. But let these kind of changes go through, and you'll find out that when you mix it up, you stop them from being able to figure out how they use their way to manipulate it, and they'll get caught if they try and make their other changes because of the change. That's what you're opening them up to.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd first off say, I didn't hear anybody here criticize Jim Lemke.
No, I was just
This
saying.
room is very much in support of Jim Lemke.
Yeah.
Our problem, if we have one, is the Republican Party can't seem to bring this forward. Not Jim Lemke. We got a majority Republican legislature, and they can't move it, and there's a problem when that happens.
Yeah, there's one thing I would.
My question for
Yes,
you,
sir.
okay, is what, you convinced him that the Missouri plan is the worst way to pick a judge unless you want a progressive, activist, elitist judiciary.
That sums it up.
But you haven't convinced me yet, what is the best way
Sure.
to pick a judge?
Yep.
Is it to elect them? What should the limits of the terms be? Who's an expert on this? Who's done the studies? I have my frustration here, seriously, that I got this activist judiciary, federal all the way down, and no one's got a way to fix it.
I would encourage.
my first.
That's a good question. If you want, there's a great PDF. If you go to the Federal Society's website, it's called like fed-soc.org.
Okay?
They have a review of all the states and how they do it. And it's really neat. They got little pie charts and who elects, who doesn't, how many citizens, and it's a great resource to take a look at. I would
You know
encourage-
how Massachusetts does it?
Yeah, it's an executive order. It's funny. The opponents sometimes like to mislead people and say there's 30 states that use the Missouri plan. That includes Massachusetts, which I believe is established through executive order by the governor, and he just appoints the entire commission. So when they say 30 states, I've said, hey, we'll take that Missouri plan state any day of the week. But the real question,
What's the maximum length of a term for a judge in states? Do you know that? They don't
Actually,
apply
I think,
for life, right?
I believe the longest term is either Missouri's 12-year term for appellate judges. I think a state might have 14. For some reason, I think there's a state with a 14-year
Age
age.
limit in Missouri, correct?
There is. In Missouri, we have a mandatory retirement at 70. Most states, I think they're 8 to 10 years on average. On average.
Do you have an opinion of what's too long?
I would say 12 years is a pretty long time, but that's just my opinion. I think going back before the voters, I mean, my personal opinion is 12 years is a pretty long time. The question on elections, the U.S. constitutional, everyone's going to probably have a different opinion. I believe in the people. I like the idea of letting the people hire and fire. But also, our founding fathers, this whole debate, I mean, literally, James Madison, our founding fathers, they had this whole conversation. Benjamin Franklin made a joke about a commission. He was like, well, maybe we should just let the lawyers pick it. And they started laughing. And one of the Federalist Papers kind of scribbled down. But they said, should Jefferson wanted to elect? He said, I do not want to give that authority to the executive. Adams wanted the president to be able to really make the appointment, and then kind of, well, maybe the Senate could reject. Then kind of the compromise came up with our if the president nominated, the state senate confirmed. And so, you know, part of me also kind of leans to them, figure they're a little smarter than I am, and you know, they got it right, and so maybe that's not a bad idea either. Either of them will be better and more transparent. The question is, do you want to give that authority to your executive, or do you want the people? That's really probably the difference between a federal or the election, is who, as citizens, do you want to give that constitutional authority to? Last question, then I'm going to sit down.
One, just
That's all I'm saying.
quick observation on where a larger part of the problem might be. Any idea what the population of Missouri is?
5.911 million.
And he said the one election where the senator was swayed had said, how many calls?
Probably had about 300 calls.
Okay, that ratio, that's what the problem is. We like to dodge it and blame it on this guy or that guy or that. It's you. We the people. If you are not, how many people are in this room? Pretty close to 70. I'm betting not too many of you called on one of these elections or votes. If you are not talking to your friends and neighbors, if you are not speaking out at work, at lunches, at picnics, you are the problem.
Yep. That's absolutely, it's true. And one voice does make a difference. One person saying something does make a difference. I've seen it. I see these people flip. I see them complain. But that's how you're going to make it. And you know, I always tell people, if you want to vote no, fine, vote no. Just tell me you're going to vote no. That's fine. And then don't complain when we go educate and tell people. We'll put it on the website or email it around. But information is power to the citizens to hold your public officials accountable. Thank you very much. I have some information, and I'll stick around for the next question.
All right, guys, so Van started a little bit, and I'm going to give you a little bit more. So yes, here's what you have to do. Go to Jefferson City. Talk to your legislators if you don't like what they're doing. Say, why isn't this bill moving forward? Why isn't this legislation being introduced? Why is this such crap? Fix it and make it better. So go, call, visit, as he said.
And encourage. And encourage.
And encourage them when they're doing the right thing. That's absolutely right, because I am here to tell you, when we go to Jefferson City, there are people in fancy suits and nice shoes, and they're having much more of an impact than any one of us if we're not going up there. And that's absolutely true. If you haven't been to Jefferson City, if you've never called your representative, I'm sorry, but don't complain to me. Because I've been to Jefferson City, I've made phone calls. So I'm doing my part. And that's what everybody has to do. So we want to get you guys out there. Along those lines, I'm also going to bring up Missouri Precinct Project. Okay, in the last election cycle, we did not have enough Republican volunteers working the polling places. Missouri Precinct Project, which is Frida back there, they do all kinds of stuff to help you guys get ready to go out to the polling places. We have to, she gave me some statistics here. There are 550 precincts in St. Louis County divided into 28 townships, 400 polling places. Each polling place needs 8 workers. For all those, you got to have 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans. Up in North County, you got no Republicans, kids. So you have Democrats working the polls as Republicans. Then we want to talk about voter fraud. We want to be upset that we're not winning elections. Then go be a poll worker. Get in touch with Frida. Yes. Get in touch with Frida. She will help you. She will tell you what you need to do in order to get certified, how much time that you need. You do have to do it some schedule ahead of time. Get that information for her. This is what we need to do. This is Tea Party. I speak all over the place about how to get involved, and we talk, and I tell you what to do, and all the organizations get involved with. And every month it's the same thing. What can I do? What can I do? I'm telling you what to do. So do these things. That's the stuff that's going to make a difference. She's waving the donation box back there. We do accept donations. Now that I've yelled at you, you don't want to give me donations.
Thought I'd get them while they're in a good mood.
Yeah, exactly. I just made them all mad. Next month, we will be in St. Charles, so please spread the word because this will be our first after party in St. Charles. So we're really excited to go out there, and it will be Champion the Vote. It's all about getting out the vote. Something else you guys need to be doing. You need to be walking. You need to be talking. You need to be knocking on doors. If we want to win, we have to do something. We can't just come to this room every month and have a big party and complain. We have to get out and do stuff. I think that's just about it for tonight. I am Michelle Moore. I'm the executive director of St. Louis Tea Party. I always assume everybody knows who I am, but you don't, and I'm sorry about that. Thanks again so much to James Harris for coming out tonight and doing Better Course for Missouri. Thank you to Gary for arranging everything for us, because he's awesome, and he also goes to Jefferson City all the time. We will hang around and socialize afterwards, so don't feel the need to run off. If anybody wants to talk to me, I will be here. Don't forget we have the schedules back there with Patchy is also shaking at me. Yes, ma'am. Did you have a question? Okay.
Is there an update on the popular vote?
Getting rid of the Electoral College? No, I don't have anything on that.
It's done.